Hello everyone and welcome to Talking Wolves and welcome to a sort of new series idea. This is big bucks versus budget. Now I actually did a similar series almost a year to the day that this will come out last summer, which was our dream signings versus realistic signings. Now in not wanting to warrant too many of the same comments as last time of,
Oh, my dream signing would be Lionel Messi for right wing.
I've kind of narrowed it down and improved it slightly, tweaked things around. So, how is this concept going to work? Let's take a look. In this video, I'll be looking at the key positions in which Wolves need to strengthen. I'll be looking at what profile of player the squad needs for each position, and using that, coming up with two transfer targets with a big bucks and budget option. For our big bucks options, I'll be looking at players who would cost Wolves £25 to £40 million. Our budget players will simply offer us a cheaper alternative. So let's begin with centre-back. Of course, a position that we haven't really improved since the Championship days. In fact, the last first-team ready centre-back you could argue that we signed was in the Championship with Willy Bolly. I know that obviously Jesus Vallejo signed, but do we really count that? I mean, really? Come on. So I'm going to be sticking with the fact that Bolly is the last one that we signed, because Jesus Vallejo definitely wasn't first-team ready. So, the characteristics. Let's take a look at what our centre-backs have. Defensive aggression, pace and ball-carrying ability is something that Bruno Lage has called out for in the press. So my centre-back picks will be based on these three key characteristics. So my big bucks option for this position is going to be Obit Evan Ndika. Now Ndika has won the Europa League with Frankfurt, obviously beating Rangers in the final. And I have to say this guy is an unbelievably good talent, only 22. And still got plenty of time to improve. And he's improved a lot over the past year or so with Frankfurt as well. His one-on-one defending is incredibly strong, very, very good one-on-one, which I think, with Connor Cody, Willy Bolly, that's kind of their, I'd say, main weak point is when you isolate them or they get dragged out, they can't seem to always cope. But Ndika benefits from a big frame. He's tall, he's quick. And he's able to cover ground a lot as well, which we saw in the Liverpool game, for instance. Totti Gomez was able to recover from a lost ball, a lost duel, high up the pitch. He managed to sprint back and recover it. That's the kind of thing we need. If we were to make a mistake, no defender's perfect. They need to be able to recover. In terms of on the ball, we're looking for a ball carrier, obviously, and he's very, very good at that. And that's where I think his quality comes into play when it comes to higher European levels. I think that from the clips that I've seen and from the games that I've watched him in, particularly in the Europa League, looks very comfortable on the ball, picks the pass well, knows how to work well in tight spaces. I think that could be an aspect that you could look at maybe as potentially something you could improve. I think the Premier League is a much different league, it's a lot more intense, lots of pace. So you'd probably have to get used to that, but he's played at a very high level already, and he's definitely set to be a French international as well. So 22 years of age, you can't really complain with the experience he has. And also, he's only got 1 year left on his contract, which means that if we're looking in terms of valuation, I think it's fair to say that he would probably be within that £30 to £40 million mark. So at that price, with very little cons, and basically the ideal profile of centre-back being tall, pacey, aggressive, good on the ball, there's no real way you can go wrong with Ndika. So he would certainly be my top pick and our big buck buy. So from big bucks to budget, this is our budget option, and it is Lucas Martinez Quarta from Fiorentina. Argentinian centre-back, has already played at an international level as well, and plenty of promise about this guy. Signed him from River Plate. Now, he's a slightly different option, I think, to Ndika. Not as tall. He's 5'11", which a few people, you can argue that that's not tall enough for the centre-back position, but I've seen other reports say that he's 6 foot, so who really knows? He is a player that is good in the sense that he's good on the ball, and he's actually quite good aerially. I've watched quite a bit of video footage of him, and he is good in the air for someone who's not as tall as some other centre-back options out there. He's got very good leap on him, he's athletic, and he's also from what I've seen, technically gifted. He works well, again, in those tight spaces. He's got good footwork. He's absolutely brilliant at tackling as well. His tackling percentiles are fantastic. And if you're actually looking for a centre-back to be able to be technically gifted to bring the ball out, this guy's stats are absolutely phenomenal. It was one of the reasons why he caught my eye to look into him, because his progressive carries, passes, dribbles completed are absolutely phenomenal for a centre-back. And this is in a decent league as well in Serie A. I know Serie A is, obviously, we do say a lot of these leagues maybe aren't quite as intense as the Premier League. But when you've got a centre-back that's in the top 5 or even sometimes the top 1%, in the percentile range for progressive carries, dribbles, etc., etc., you're looking at a centre-back there that is very, very comfortable at bringing the ball out. And if we can have someone that can link the play between the defence and midfield, I mean, that's pretty much your ideal kind of profile of player. Yes, the height is the issue, but I don't think height is particularly important when it comes to a ball-carrying centre-back. I think if you have a more physical presence alongside him, maybe a Jesse Mosquera, a Willy Bolly, a Max Kilman, someone who is taller. I know Kilman's aerial duel percentage isn't great, but he definitely improved as the season went on. I think if you've got someone taller or more physical next to him to get those first headers, I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue. And he is still quick enough to get around that, and he's still technically good enough to play, I think, in the Premier League. And he's played at an international level as well. So you really can't argue there in terms of a solid centre-back that's going to cost you less money than Ndika and will probably fit into the side quite well. Okay, so moving on from centre-backs, let's look at our midfield options and which attributes we need to add. What Wolves have lacked in their midfield has been dynamism, a player with a bit of pace and a bit of technical ability to drive us up the pitch. I'm also going to be looking at combative midfielders with a good passing range to replace Neves or Moutinho in case they leave, and also an attacking midfielder for Bruno's switch to a 4 at the back. So our big bucks option for our dynamic midfielder is, of course, Matheus Nunes, or however you want to pronounce it. Now, we have actually been linked with this guy from Sporting, of course. Pep Guardiola, very, very complimentary about him. And it's fair to see why. I mean, he's unbelievably good. Technically, is such a wonderful player to watch in midfield. He's one of those players that you would pay to go and watch. Very much the ideal replacement for someone like a Neves who would leave. Very different type of player, but I do think that he offers something that the midfield doesn't have at the moment, which is a bit of height mixed with flair. He's quite a tall central midfielder, but he's very, very light on his feet. He's able to turn very well, always looks for those kind of passes in between the lines. Very good at kind of drifting out wide, coming back inside. He links the play well, kind of in the middle of the park. If you had a number 9 or a number 10 there, he'd be the kind of ideal ball carrier to kind of get you from A to B. And he also offers that kind of threat in front of goal as well. He is a goal scorer. Now, if you look at his stats, they aren't great in terms of numbers. But if you're looking at what he offers in terms of the overall play, I think you can forgive maybe him not getting 10 goals a season. But we will come on to attacking midfielders, which is probably where your bulk of your midfielder goals will come on. He's physically imposing, has very good vision as well. And he's able to, I think, play at a high level. I think he's certainly shown that. But obviously the main issue is the competition from Manchester City. When a club that big come calling, it's going to be very difficult for us to compete with that sort of money and that level of talent as well. But I think in terms of an all-round midfielder, if you're looking for someone to really elevate us to the next level, Matheus Nunes is the perfect player, because he's going to be able to give us energy. He's going to be able to give us more of a physical presence in there, alongside some of the flair and mobility that we kind of lack. And for a big man as well, he's very mobile. So that's, I think, obviously another key aspect into what makes him so preferable for me. So our budget option for the dynamic midfielder is the 22-year-old Mali international Cheikh Doucouré. Now, this guy has got huge potential, and at the moment is being touted for figures of around £15 million. I know that at the time of recording there hasn't been any concrete moves from any clubs, but from what I've seen, the ones that have been reportedly most interested have been Arsenal and Crystal Palace. So whether we're going to be able to get in ahead of those two clubs is yet to be seen. But if it was left up to me, I would certainly be going in for someone of this talent. In terms of the profile of play that we're looking at, 5'10.5" according to FB Ref, so he's got a decent bit of height about him, and from what I've watched as well, he's very, very good at winning the ball back. Now obviously that is kind of your first remit when looking for a dynamic central midfielder, that's someone that can get you up the pitch and win possession back. In terms of the player profile that we're looking at more with these players rather than in the next one, which will be combative and good passes, we're looking more so at what they are good at on the ball. And this guy's pass completion and also progressive carries and passes stats are very, very good. Now, we're looking at someone who is intelligent, knows when to run with the ball, when to pass it off, and he's also backing that up with good passing statistics. Now, other players that I'd looked at, such as Timothy Tillman and Seko Fofana, offer up viral alternatives, but I think Tillman is more of a dribbling midfielder and his passing rate isn't anywhere near as good as Doucouré. And again, Seko Fofana is a good shout. Also, of course, at RC Lens, those two as a midfield duo is, I mean, what a partnership that would be. Obviously, Doucouré, a few years younger, so still with that resale value and that potential as well. But he's got excellent energy and reminds me a little bit of Kante. I know that that's kind of a cheap comparison, but I think Kante is very much more now that box-to-box midfielder. And Doucouré kind of reminds me of that, the way he wins the ball back and he's quick and he's agile and he gets up the pitch. And he's not afraid to, you know, maybe contribute to the play going forward if needs be. And with a good passing range as well. I just think he'd be a really solid option for the price that's been touted in the news as well. You really can't go wrong with this player. And of course, Mali International. As I've said with previous targets, I always prefer to have players with a bit of international experience that know how to cope with those kind of heavy workload of games. So again, another really decent budget option for us there. I think he'll certainly be one of those players that could come into the side and certainly keep the ball rolling and kind of get you off your seat, you know. One of those players that can find pockets of space and dart into them and make a really nice pass out to the left wing or the right wing and, you know, start to get you a little bit excited and just show a little bit of commitment and a bit of energy from our midfield and a bit of pace, which is something that I think is a really important part in getting people off your seats. It's all well and good having a good winger like Adama to, you know, create something, but I think if you've got a midfield there that is able to show some flair, show some energy, win the ball back constantly and be able to to show good movement on and off the ball, I think that's a huge part as to why we're not succeeding to the same levels that we could be. Now, 1 goal and 4 assists this season is actually a pretty decent return for someone who primarily plays as a defensive midfielder, but I think if you were to play him as a central midfielder slightly more advanced, then I think, you know, he's probably got a better shot, obviously, of getting forward. It all depends on the 3 Bruno Lage wants to play, if it's 1 holding and 2 advanced or 2 kind of sitting and 1 as the number 10. We don't really know at this point in time what the plan is. I don't think anyone does apart from them. So I think Doucouré, very, very serious option for us to look at and consider. Again, there's other clubs in the mix, but if you're looking for a player with energy, a good intelligence for interceptions, a player that can carry the ball and create chances with a good range of passing, I think this guy as a Nunes light is pretty much the ideal player. Right, now on to our second, I guess, substrata or subheading of midfielders, which would be combative midfielders, a defensive midfielder, an absolute brick in midfield to be able to win the ball back and get us going. Now, Neves and Moutinho, I think, have been very good at that for the past couple of years. It's fair to say that their defensive talents are a very underrated part of their game. They're excellent at winning the ball back and pinging the balls out when we attack in transition, on the counter-attack. And, you know, I think that's what we'll miss, really, if Neves and or Moutinho were to leave. But I think that we really need a kind of kingpin defensive midfielder to then allow our other 2, if we're going to go 4-3-3, to flourish. So for big bucks, I've gone with João Palhinha. Again, a player that we've been linked with perennially because of his links, Portugal, Gestafu, all that nonsense. But it's fair to say that this would be a very, very good signing. Very good defensively, better than Neves and Moutinho, I think, defensively. That's certainly more his game, bigger in stature. And on the ball as well, he's got a really, really impressive passing range. I think you're looking at a player that's less technical, but I do think that, or less technical than Neves and Moutinho, I should say. But I think in terms of what you're replacing with Neves, he's a good tackler and he can pass the ball well. Palhinha is a pretty much, not an eye for eye replacement. I think Neves is still technically superior and a bit more suited to going forward and getting in and around the edge of the penalty area for, you know, that goal against Watford, for example. But I think Palhinha offers someone to do the dirty work and to allow other players to flourish. I think if you've got Neves and Moutinho that are both kind of transition midfielders, they're going to win the ball back. I think then with both of them doing that job, you become a little bit limited. So I think that having Palhinha in there as the stalwart and a player that can, you know, get us going, I think that he offers up a very, very good replacement for Neves. Okay, so the budget option for the combative midfield, or defensive midfield, I suppose, is Santi Comesanya from Rayo Vallecano. Promoted last season, very good first season back in La Liga, and this guy is one of the standout players from that team. Pretty much mid-table when it comes to stats, but Rayo Vallecano themselves, I think, finished 11th or 12th, so it kind of goes without saying. But I've seen this guy play a few times, and he's defensive and, again, stats in terms of bringing the ball forward with progressive passes received, progressive passes, progressive carries, dribbles completed, and his defensive numbers coincided with that, actually make for a really, really decent looking player. He hasn't got a lot of international experience, which I think is maybe where you'd think, you know, do we go for it? But I think that it's kind of in that profile of a lesser known name that can improve that you can then sell on. And I think if you're looking at a defensive midfielder that has good numbers in a strong league for a newly promoted side as well, I think that those are the sorts of players that Wolves will look at. Those lesser known names that have good numbers, good base numbers. We'll go and watch them and see if they can make a difference into the side. And I think he's the case. I think he is one of those cases here. Okay, now let's look at attacking midfielders. Of course, Morgan Gibbs-White is the main guy at the moment, isn't he? He's the one that we all want to join up back with the side. But I think it's fair to say that he's been stung a couple of times by the club, obviously, when he came back on loan and Nuno didn't play him. And I think being sent out on loan this season may have stung him a little bit despite a good start to the season. So there's a bit of convincing there to get him to stay. And there's been inquiries by AC Milan, which is mental to think about, really. But he is a good player and one that could very well join back with the team, with the first team, and make an impact. However, we do need to look at viable alternatives. So let's look at those. So our big bucks option for this position is Dani Olmo. Yes, I know, boring, Dani Olmo. We've been linked with him plenty of times, spoke about him plenty of times. But if you're looking at a midfielder that's going to cost you 35, 40 million, I think that's a fair price for Dani Olmo. I think he's a very good progressive carrier of the ball and he offers some creativity in midfield. I think that's the main thing, you know. Even with all these other options, I think Mateus Nunes aside, you know, those two are really your kind of main creative midfielders. And Dani Olmo offers an excellent, excellent option for that number 10 role. Obviously, Kevin Thelwell wanted him, apparently, when he was at Wolves. So he's a player that we know Fosun are interested in. And we've all seen him. I think a lot of us have seen him by now playing for Leipzig and Spain. And he's proved himself to be a very useful player. He offers goals from midfield as well. He's got a great strike on him. And I think that that's something we lack. Maybe Gibbs-White can do that. But if we really want to go big on an attacking midfielder, then I think Dani Olmo has to be the player that we have to go for. I think physicality would probably be what you look at. I know that, you know, Trincao, for example, has struggled with the physicality. Olmo is a similar build. He's not the biggest. But if you're talking technical ability, he would be far superior to anyone in the squad that we have and would make a huge difference. And again, would show the ambition. Difficulty is obviously playing in Europe with Leipzig is a big factor in him playing there. So I don't think we could really offer him European football. And for that reason, I think it's going to be a struggle. But he's still fairly young. He offers resale value. He's played numerous games for Spain and he's shown that he's got quality there. So if you're looking for goals for midfield, technical ability, someone with good passing that's going to unlock a defence, perfect player. So the budget player for this round of targets is Christian Eriksen. Now, a few of you might be like, well, Christian Eriksen isn't exactly a budget name or a budget player. But, you know, his contract at Brentford was only 6 months, which makes him a free agent this summer. I think he would probably take a reduced wage. I'm fairly sure he took a reduced wage to join Brentford. And no offence to Brentford, but I think if Brentford could afford him, I think that there's no question that we can. And I think that he's certainly, I mean, without doubt, a player that would improve the side. He knows the Premier League inside and out. He's been to a Champions League final. He's a key player for Denmark. And of course, we have been previously linked with him when he was at Inter Milan. And I think it was Sky Italy that reported that we got in contact with his representatives and inquired about his services. So it's, again, another player that Fosun have obviously looked at. And I think that if you're talking about a quality of player for a cut price, I mean, that would be akin or better than getting João Moutinho for 5 million. It's that sort of deal we're talking about here. An older player that's experienced, still full of quality, for a cheaper price, on good wages, knows the league well. I think for me, you can't really get a much better budget option. I think wages obviously would be quite high, but I don't think the signing on fee would be ridiculous, considering he's just coming back from health complications. But he's been in the Premier League for 6 months now and he's looked good for Brentford. And again, it's that creative spark and just someone to actually deliver from set pieces and being able to offer us a different dimension going forward. Instead of us being so repetitive with the wingers and the wing backs, we need to have different ways of unlocking defences. And I think his experience, his leadership will be crucial for us to try and push back into Europe. I think we're more likely maybe to push for those top 7 places than Brentford. And I think he could see us as the ideal next stepping stone. Maybe if he wants to get back into the top 6 or a big 6 club, I think we're kind of that next rung up. So I definitely feel as though he would be a really, really solid option to get in for very little money. Okay, so let's move on to our next position, which is wingers. A lack of direct play and goals has been a huge issue for Wolves' wingers. So in this section, I'll be looking at players that can carry the ball well, create chances and score goals. So, thank you, voiceover Tom. Yes, of course, goals are the issue. Now, I know a lot of you might roll your eyes and say, another winger, why do we need another one? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's very much the possibility that Trincao could leave or will not stay after his loan. Adama Traore, I mean, what the hell's going to happen with him? He doesn't look like he wants to be here. Pedence potentially, he doesn't look to be particularly happy here either. And then obviously Hwang, he's our second top goal scorer, but he's underperformed massively as well. When you're looking at it from the standpoint of quality rather than depth, I think that, I think more depth is certainly needed. Quality depth is certainly needed. And obviously there has been talk, Tim Spears said on the podcast, if you've seen it, that they're looking at making Chiquinho a wing back. So that leaves us with quite limited options from the wing positions. Of course, Pedro Neto is still kind of recovering from his injury as well. So I'd say Pedence and Neto really are the 2 wingers that you're going to have that are going to make a difference. But you can't just have 2 wingers. So the big bucks option for the winger is Gonzalo Guedes. Yeah, I know. Same as last year. I think I put him as my realistic buy for last year, with Rafinha being my big bucks buy or dream signing. But yeah, Gonzalo Guedes, again, another player that has been linked several times with the club. But I do genuinely think that this would be a very, very smart signing. Again, links with the Mendes links and the whole Portugal thing, we all know about that, don't need to bang on about it. But he's actually had a very good season this season, 11 goals and 6 assists. He is a winger that can get you goals, and his numbers for progressive carries are really good as well, and progressive passes as well are very strong, which shows you that he can run with the ball. I've watched him play obviously before because we got linked with him so many times. You've got to check out the players you've been linked with. Very good on the ball. His close control is actually really impressive as well. And he's kind of in that Jota mould of, he doesn't look very quick when he's running, but he runs so much quicker with the ball. He's got a deceptive speed about him and an ability to be able to just bounce off players, which I think we've missed since Jota left, really. I think Pedro Neto is probably the closest we've come to that in terms of a deceptively strong and quick winger. And of course, with a winger that can play progressive passes, is only going to create more chances for our strikers now. Our chance creation has been, as we all know, pretty poor. And that's kind of a circle. It's a catch-22, isn't it? Because the strikers aren't scoring enough. and we're not getting enough service. But if the centre forwards aren't in the box, then how is the service supposed to be good? It all culminates in the same thing. But in terms of a winger that can actually play progressive passes and be a creator, I think that's something that we miss, apart from Chiquinho. But I think that Guedes offers a bit more of an inside forward and winger combined, rather than just a pure out-and-out winger or a pure out-and-out inside forward. So he has both of those qualities there. Not to mention end product. I mean, he has had end product. Been a bit hit and miss in the past couple of seasons. This season, though, has been strong. So you're talking about a winger that is going to be able to get involved with the play and the goals as well, which is, again, we need to have that. Okay, so our budget option is going to be Denis Bouanga from Saint-Etienne, Gabonese international, and a very, very decent player for what is a struggling side. In fact, they are in the relegation playoff this season, Saint-Etienne. So you might turn your nose up and that say, oh, well, playing for a relegated side, but his numbers are actually pretty good. He's got a high percentile for pressures, which would suit Bruno's team well. Obviously, one of the reasons why he wanted Hwang in was because of how well he presses. So Bouanga, his pressing numbers are actually very good. So to have a winger that will be able to press the ball is exactly what Bruno wants. Now, from what I've seen of him, he's not afraid to shoot, which again is another positive. So many times we've screamed out over the past couple of seasons, just shoot for God's sake, getting in good positions, and we're trying to pass the ball in. He's very, very keen to cut in either side and have a shot, and he's also quite adept at making good runs into the box, a little bit Sterling-esque, where he comes in from out wide, goes into the box and offers there for a rebound or a tap-in. He does tend to score a few tap-ins and rebounds here and there from his previous clubs and at Saint-Etienne as well. He's scored between 7 and 10 goals. I think it's gone 7, 9 and 10 in obviously earlier seasons to latest season at Saint-Etienne. And you're talking for a struggling side here. I think this season he's got 9 goals and 6 assists in Ligue 1, which is a pretty solid return for a player that's playing in a team that could be about to get relegated. He's also quick. He's not as quick as a Lozano or a Guedes, but he's quick on the ball. He's got good footwork as well, slightly taller, more of a physical presence. In fact, his aerials 1 percentile is actually really good, which I think is useful because it's something that Adama was good at, for example. Adama's aerial duels are really good, numbers-wise. And having a winger that can actually win a header, I think, is quite underrated when you're looking at using the wide areas as in this kind of as a pressure reliever. If you've got a winger that can win a header, win a first or a second ball from in the air, and keep possession, that's quite important. And I think that physical presence on the wing is missing a little bit since Adama left. And I think Bouanga offers up an alternative to that with someone who is good in the air. In terms of passing intelligence, he's also very, very good at sort of waiting for fullbacks to kind of give him options. And I think, again, that's something that our wingers are good at, but the more the merrier, really. If we can have different players that can create chances, it's only going to help us in the long run. I think cons-wise, again, Ligue 1 isn't the greatest league, but I think you would combat that by saying, well, he's playing for a struggling side. And a lot of good talents do come from the French league as well. So I think it'd be naive to turn your nose up at that. And when you're looking for lesser-known players, he's 27, so he's kind of in his prime, and you'd get him for a smaller fee if Saint-Etienne were to go down. And of course, we did get Bakary Sakho from Saint-Etienne, so I'm just saying, our track record with Saint-Etienne is pretty good. And if he's anything as good as Sakho, then, you're onto a winner there. So that is it for the wingers. Now let's move on to centre forwards and have a look at the attributes needed. Centre forward is probably the most difficult position to figure out for this team. It's obvious Bruno Lage wants someone with a bit of height to get on the end of crosses, but also someone to just get in the box and grab some goals. For this section, I'll be looking at taller strikers that can get on the end of said crosses, but also players with a bit of pace and directness for a bit of variety. Okay, so it's pretty clear. A bit of height or a bit of pace. Either one would be preferable. Now I'm going to start off with the big book signing, which is Gianluca Scamacca. Now for this one, I've actually gone with height. 6'4", 16 goals in Serie A this season. An incredibly good season from him for Sassuolo. And I think he offers a very, very good alternative for Raul Jimenez. If there's any striker that I would want Wolves to sign in terms of affordable and realistic, I think Scamacca has to be someone that we look at. I think when everyone's banging on about Darwin Núñez, I think he's quite similar to Darwin Núñez in play style. I think from what I've seen of both of them, I think Scamacca's got just as good as, if not better, technical ability. And I think that he's a very, very underrated striker who's had a very good season. I haven't really seen too many people talking about him getting a big move, and I think that we could definitely steal in there. His market value was around 30 million, so if we're looking to get him, it probably would be around that, or maybe 35 to 40. But centre forwards in this day and age, you're going to have to pay big money for goals. We're not going to be able to get a 15 to 20 goal striker on a shoestring budget. You've got to remember that we signed Jimenez, I think, for around 32.5 million, if I'm right in saying. Someone can correct me on that. But it was at least 30 million. And this was for a player who was 29, I think, at the time, in his prime, and scoring, 15 goals in the Premier League, 17 goals in the Premier League as well, 27 in all competitions in that Europa League season. So when you put it like that, Scamacca, I think, 16 goals in a competitive division and a similar calibre, I think, of player. He's only 23 as well. He's already got 3 appearances for Italy as well. I think you're buying there a player with huge potential for resale value, which is, of course, what Fosun will look at, and also a high-quality player. Jimenez is 31 now, 30, 31. He's getting on a little bit. Scamacca, 23 years old, is so much younger, already has a good profile physically as well to be able to deal with the Premier League. And with how good our wingers are at getting in crosses, this guy would get on the end of absolutely everything. Having a look at his goals, he does score a very good range of goals as well. Lots of goals on the turn, in and around the penalty area, from crosses. Quite a few of them have actually come from balls across the face of goal, which he's managed to get onto, which is something that we've desperately lacked this season. Just someone with a bit of instinct to get on that penalty spot and convert chances. We even looked at Kiefer Moore for that profile of player. Scamacca is just another level. He definitely reminds me of Jimenez when he first joined. The interlinking play. He's got surprisingly quick feet for someone who's 6'4". He's done some really nice roulettes, bits of skill to get away from defenders. And his intelligence as well, his positioning and his passing intelligence is criminally underrated. He links up play really well. There's a few times where he'll drift to the edge of the box, a winger will come in and he'll flick it to the winger, or he'll hold it up, play it out for a central midfielder or an attacking midfielder or a strike partner to get onto. Very, very reminiscent of that old Jimenez with the energy, the determination to press, the link-up play. But he, I think for me, gets in the box more than Jimenez does. And I think that's what we're missing. And I think for the price, for his age, for the goals that he's scored, I think there's no better player in the market at the moment for us to go out, spend some big money on a centre forward and make a statement signing. So my budget option, I've gone with a different profile of player as well as a different price range. I've actually gone with Ben Brereton Diaz. Now, I think that the thing is with Diaz is that he hasn't got the best injury record, but he's got 1 year left on his contract. You could probably get him for around £10 million. He's got a really good record for Blackburn and Chile. The goals kind of dried up a little bit towards the end of the season, but Blackburn's performances as a whole kind of dipped. So I think that he kind of offers a good alternative, really, in terms of a player that we can spend a little bit less on, that can get goals. And again, similar to Scamacca, he's not afraid to get in the box. He pressures defenders well and goalkeepers well, scores a variety of goals. So it's one of those players, you need a nuisance in the box. You need someone who's going to occupy defenders to open up space. And he's one of those players that can do that. He's got a good record for Chile as well, of course, now that he is a Chilean international. So he does offer someone that can really kind of offer something different. He's a bit quicker. He's not as tall, but he is quicker. And he's still, you got to remember, he's still a decent physical profile as well. Clubs like West Ham have been interested in him as well. So you're looking at clubs that are competing for the top 7, looking at this guy. I don't think we should really turn up our noses. I think he's 23, 24 now as well, so he's still young, or youngish. He's not in his prime yet, so he's got a good few years in him. I think, again, like I said, the concern probably would be his injury record. However, I think we have quite good luck when it comes to injuries, and I think we do have a decent medical team. Obviously, this season hasn't really been the case, but I think we've had just a poor second half of the season overall. Nothing's really gone right. I think he offers pace, finishing intelligence as well, and he's smart in the box. He makes good runs, and someone, again, who's not going to be afraid to get in the mixer, so to speak, and get involved with the play. So I think, yeah, technically I think he's, again, a bit more maybe limited than Scamacca, but he does show good glimpses of being able to take players on and make a pass for a player. And, you know, again, more resale value if he performs well in the Premier League. So, yeah, I don't think we could really go wrong. It's kind of a low-risk signing. His contract expires in 2023, so I suppose you could go in for him in January on a pre-contract. We'll have to wait and see. I personally think that this would be a smart signing. Southampton bought Armstrong from Blackburn last season, and he hasn't done as well. But I do think that Brereton offers a better alternative. I think he's more suited to the Premier League, and I think he would be a good budget signing. Okay, so moving on to our honourable mentions. I'm going to choose one for each position, or one for each sector, just so it's not too long. I think for centre-back, I think Jean-Claire Todibo is still a viable option. I still think that he's a fantastic young player and a young centre-half, and you know, with the potential to get even better, and someone that Wolves have been linked with previously as well, so definitely one to look out for there. He's good at bringing the ball out again, like we've said before. He's quick. I think his defending could be improved a little bit, but again, he's played 36 games. He's starting regularly, and he's starting to show that improvement now. It took him a little while, but I think he's really starting to show some considerable talent to back up his potential. And I think, again, another player that we could potentially go in for. In terms of money, you know, it could be quite a pricey one because of his age and his potential. But again, another player that Wolves have previously looked into, and I don't see why we should stop there. So for the midfield option, I've kind of gone with a couple of players. I think Adrien Rabiot would be good for that Combative midfielder. Very surprised to see him join us, to be honest. But his defensive numbers are very good. He's got a year left on his contract, and he's got a good range of passing as well. So that combative / good passing midfielder as well. He's, you know, in terms of that type of player, he'd be a good shout. And, you know, as I mentioned previously, with a year left on his contract, you're getting him on a reduced transfer fee. So I don't think you can go too wrong there. I think for the dynamic midfielder, Timothy Tillman, whilst his passing stats aren't fantastic, having watched him play, I think he's an intelligent midfielder who uses space well and can combine pretty well with wingers as well. He's a good dribbler, and he's only 23, playing for relegated Greuther Fürth as well, so you'd get him for absolute peanuts. Again, another player that I think would be a decent little squad player to add to the team and just give something different in midfield, something different for other teams to think about. And then for attacking midfield, I think Adrian Thomasson from Strasbourg would be a really, really decent pickup. Excellent stats in Ligue 1 this season. And again, if we're willing to splash out a little bit of money on an experienced attacking midfielder, I think he would certainly be a player that I would look at. Good dribbler, good on the ball, gets involved a lot with goals as well. 8 goals and 4 assists this season. And in terms of someone who can actually get forward and create chances and create goals as well, you know, that's what we need, goals from midfield. I think he would actually be a very, very decent player to look at. I think in terms of wingers as well, Hirving Lozano would make a big difference. He's quick, pacey, knows how to score goals as well. Not as many as Guedes, but I think he offers a good alternative to Guedes. If we're looking at someone that's a bit more expensive, the Mexican connection with Raul as well could always be worth a shot. So yeah, I think he would be a decent honourable mention as well for the winger position. And my final centre forward recommendation would be Andre Silva. Of course, we've been linked with him before, but a good amount of goals in the Bundesliga nonetheless, and again, a player that could still suit us, alongside maybe someone like Taiwo Awoniyi, who's got, I think, 15 goals in the Bundesliga, 2 goals in the Conference League as well. Another decent striker who's had a good season. Again, could be one to look into. There's certainly plenty of options out there. Okay, so that was big bucks versus budget. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions yourself for any positions that you would want Wolves to sign cover for. But thank you for watching. I've been Tom Parker on Talking Wolves, and we hope you can join us for the next video.